Mr. President, to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, a number of senators have inquired about the status of the tax legislation, and particularly the prospect of a real conference committee. It's clear that Republicans are talking among themselves, but apparently they feel, with respect to Democrats, this is a conference in name only. So what I'd like to do is spell out what we know to date and talk a bit about what would really be in the public interest. Specifically, late last night, the public learned through the press that Republicans had made no progress, their words, not mine, with respect to the tax bill. They said that all the major issues were still outstanding. And then when everybody got up and had made their way through their breakfast cornflakes, we were told that magically everything had just been worked out. Everything was worked out, and that this bill would be ready to go. Now, I know they've been trying to move at the speed of light. We had yet another dose of fake math yesterday when the Treasury Department reported on their so-called analysis to project that this bill would generate great growth when, in fact, it comes up $1 trillion short. And so I would like to make sure that the public understands what is on offer as of right now. My sense is, with respect to the key issue, which is the well-being of the middle class, because millions and millions and millions of middle-class people are going to get hurt by this legislation. Millions of them very quickly. For example, millions are going to lose their health insurance coverage. Millions more are going to get high premiums. By 2027, more than half of the middle class in America would actually be paying more in taxes. And Senate Republicans seem to be talking about a variety of issues, but not one of the tax issues that they are talking about involves bettering the quality of life for America's middle class. We don't hear any discussion of that. We hear plenty of discussion about multinational corporations. We hear plenty of discussion about rates. We hear discussions about pass-through businesses. But all of this really is like rearranging the chairs at the country club. Maybe one day the multinational corporations do a little bit better. Maybe the next day well-off heirs do a little better. Well, I believe what the American people want to see, what I heard at my recent town hall meetings, is the American people want to make sure that the middle class isn't always getting the shaft. They want to make sure, for example, that in the tax law, the breaks for the multinational corporations aren't permanent, and the breaks for the middle class are temporary. They want everybody to have a chance to get ahead. And Mr. President, it is not too late to change course. 17 moderate Democrats, led by our colleagues, Senator Manchin and Senator Kaine, said they were hungry for a bipartisan approach to bring both sides together. I've introduced 2 comprehensive bipartisan bills with senior conservative Republicans, close allies of Mitch McConnell. So we have made it very clear that we want a bipartisan bill. But the idea that all of these changes are now being discussed and our fellow Americans can read about it in the press, take a look and see if you see one idea, even one, that is going to make life better for the vast majority of working Americans, the folks who work so hard day in and day out, are walking on an economic tightrope, trying to save money, trying to educate their kids, we don't hear about one single idea, not one, that would make life better for the middle class. So we'll have more to say about this tomorrow, Mr. President. As I gather, there may be some kind of ceremonial conference committee scheduled, but I wanted Americans to know, as they try to sort through all of these reports that they're getting from lobbyists on K Street, because I guess lobbyists know lots about what the Republicans in the leadership and on the conference committee are talking about, and they're seeing it in the press. Just read through all this and look line by line to try to find anything that is going to make life better for the middle class, because I can't find it. And that, as much as anything, shows what is wrong with the way this legislation is being pursued. And what a difference from the way Ronald Reagan pursued tax reform. Ronald Reagan said point blank that the working person should at least get as good a deal as the investor. He said we ought to have the same rate of taxation for workers as we have for investors. And in fact, with Ronald Reagan, and I voted for his bill, with Ronald Reagan, the corporations, in effect, gave up some money to help the workers. Now, what we're seeing is the workers getting the short end of the stick so that the multinational corporations can do even better. So we'll have more to say tomorrow, Mr. President. But I urge people to look through all of these stories and all of these press reports and see if they can find anything that involves a change to make life better for the hardworking middle class of our country. Now, Mr. President, I also come this afternoon to talk about the passing of a vintage Oregonian, an extraordinary woman, Vera Katz, who became Oregon's first Speaker of our House of Representatives in Oregon in 1985. After serving 3 terms as Speaker, Vera Katz won the Portland mayor race in 1992. The Oregonian noted recently she moved Oregon to become a nationally recognized destination city, with developments ranging from the streetcar to the East Bank. And I hope that all Oregonians and visitors to our city stop by the bronze sculpture of Mayor Katz. It captures perfectly her strength and her warmth. She is an extraordinary person that we think about today, not just because of her memorable accomplishments, but because of her extraordinary spirit. It was indomitable. She could not be subdued when she took on an important cause. And I remember in 1996, when floodwaters on the Willamette River threatened to overwhelm downtown Portland, in the middle of this chaos, this very slight but still unbelievably powerful woman, Vera Katz, led hundreds of volunteers to mount what we came to call a sandbags and plywood defense against the floodwater. That was quintessential Vera Katz. In my town halls at home, we often speak of the Oregon way, just finding the best ideas, looking for solutions, not standoffs. And she lived and breathed that Oregon way ethos every day of her life. And I'm going to miss her, and I'm especially going to miss some moments that will never be forgotten. When we were working in the early 70s, and I had gotten involved with the elderly, and back then, Senator from North Dakota, I think, probably remembers these days, that was a time when if a town had a lunch program for senior citizens, that was a big deal. Nobody was aware that we might have all the services that we now have, in-home services, variety of transportation services. Back then, if a town had a lunch program for older people, that was a big deal. And Vera Katz was then in the legislature, and I had been running the legal aid office for the elderly and was co-director of the Gray Panthers, and all the senior citizens wanted to really focus on holding down the cost of medicine. And they told me one day, we're going to go to the legislature and we're going to bring all our pill bottles and we're going to stack them up on the table and show those legislators what it was like to really be an older person cutting pills in half, trying to find a way to make ends meet. Well, as a senator from North Dakota knows, I had never been involved in politics or public service back then. All I really wanted to do was to play in the NBA. So I didn't know if you could do that. I didn't know if you could bring all the pill bottles to the legislature. So I called Vera Katz up and I said, the seniors want to come down. Representative Katz, they want to hold up all the bottles. And I said, I really don't know what to do. And I could hear it through the phone because it just boomed out. She said, the seniors want to bring their pill bottles to wake up the legislature? And I said, yes, ma'am. And I could hear it through the phone when she said, damn right. I want them to bring their pill bottles. And they're going to get a big welcome from me. And in all those years, working with senior citizens, the very first person the seniors wanted to go see was Vera Katz. And I asked them, how come we're always going to see Vera Katz? And they said, because she always inspires us. And she always makes us laugh. And she always makes us want to get involved. So this life force, who like my family fled the Nazis, was an extraordinary public figure. And yes, she represented Portland, but she always stood up for all of Oregon. And I'll be back to the floor and in the days ahead to talk about some more about Vera Katz. She had a watermelon spitting contest with folks in rural Oregon just because she wanted to cement the bonds between Portland and the rural part of the state. She was a wonderful woman. Our state grieves today as we think of her and her extraordinary contributions, and having known her for more than 40 years, she's a role model for what public service ought to be all about. Mr. President, I yield the floor and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.